My name is Randie.
And I'm Mikey. We co-host a podcast called Millennial Marriage. A lot of the problems that we have or the things that we're going through, we're not alone.
And so we were like, okay, when we do get pregnant, it will be our journey. And so we got pregnant. We were like, oh, this is great. This is right on time. I was at work and I just felt a snap. And I ran to the bathroom. We launched a podcast a month after the miscarriage, and it felt really insincere to not mention the fact that we had miscarried. So we pushed through.
I think that the miscarriage episode actually opened like the floodgates of this relationship when it comes to communication. I think we just kind of let go of like a lot of shame and guilt when we got on the microphone and started speaking with each other. And so us being able to get through that episode, me specifically, I was like, oh, well, if I can do this with you, then sure, I'll talk to you about anything at this point. Like, let's talk.
And that's what we're going to do, and that's what we say as well on the show, Let's Talk. And the hosts of the Black Millennial Marriage Podcast, Randie and Mikey Chapman, join us from Atlanta. Thank you so much for joining. So you're the second couple now getting ready to mark another year together, your fifth anniversary?
Yes.
Does it feel the same as the first?
No. No.
I imagine you've learned and experienced so much. And Randie, first of all, thank you both for opening up with us about the loss of the pregnancy and how that changed you. Randie, we heard Mikey say that during the podcast, the loss of the opened the floodgates of communication. I find that so amazing because oftentimes it's, at least for me, when I go through tough times, I shut down. I stop talking. And it opened a floodgate for you. How did you pull to that and be able to talk?
Well, I really think our village helped us because after we miscarried, we spent a week with my mom, and the family just circulated every day into the into the house, and so we were never alone, and so we were always in conversation with someone. And my mom was really adamant about me, getting up out of bed, and so I just like translated that into conversing with Mike because that's what we do all the time anyway. And I was so stressed that I was so ashamed and guilty and stressed that this would be like the reason we broke up because it'll be my fault that I was trying to like do anything. And so talking worked.
Well, and I think that's, again, amazing because, Mike, you have all the people around you, as Randie talked about, and that distracts you from each other. And then suddenly you're alone and it's the two of you and you have to look at one another and talk. There are no distractions. And you're coming from a unique place, Mike, because you're a man and you're the father, but she's going through something very different.
Yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult, but I understood that basically I just had to kind of put my stuff to the side and just focus on her. And in doing so, like, just great conversation came from it. But it was a very rough time.
It was hard.
It was hard.
I don't even know how we did it. I mean, I think really our family, I credit our family.
There was a lot of alcohol at a certain point.
A lot of glasses of wine. But I mean, listen, whatever breaks down the wall, and again, 5 years of a wonderful relationship, and I think that people do go in knowing they're going to be difficult days, but no one upon, getting married says, okay, but what if we experience something like the loss of a pregnancy? How are we going to get through that?
We had not talked about it. We thought that we would get pregnant and stay pregnant. And
everything would be perfect.
We started this podcast. Like, it was a line. We both had jobs. We had health insurance. It seemed so in line. And then we miscarried, and that really shook everything up.
And then things just spiraled out of control.
So they say you have to go through these things to get to where you are. When you look at where you are now, of course, no one wants this tragedy. No one wants this to happen to them. But when you look at where you are now, how do you describe it, Randie?
I'm really proud because our first year, which we've talked about on the podcast, was not the fifth year. And I'm really proud of us because when we were kids, people thought we were doing, things teenagers do, and we were. But we also talked a lot. And so I'm really proud of how we thought this up and how we bounced back, because I did not think there was anything after the miscarriage. Like, I really was just waiting to die. Like, I was like, oh, okay, I'm just waiting. And it really surprised me to find so much light and love and hope afterwards, because I was not hopeful.
Well, next, the story behind the podcast episode they call Infamous. Don't go away.
Parent, I would say that I am more right than I am wrong. I would honestly say that. And I genuinely feel that way.
And
from an objective standpoint.
So you are being objective about yourself?
Yes.
Sorry, I can't do this.
We're back with Mikey and Randie Chapman. They're the hosts of the podcast you were just listening to. It's called Black Millennial Marriage Podcast. That was a clip of the episode of Who the Bleep Did I Marry? I was watching your expressions listening to that. Mikey, you have a lot of confidence, and I love that about you. Let me just tell you. I love this, Randie. You have another episode that's called Sometimes You're Hard to Love.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind that one?
We were really just trying to tap into, I don't know, the realness. People hear our episodes and they think we always like each other and that it's very simple and easy to be together. And it is not. And so we were going back and forth about things that are hard to love about each other, which was, freeing for us. And also good for people to hear, so they could give themselves a break too.
Right, because that's the thing, Mikey. You can love someone but not like them that day, and that's hard not to take personally. Because as you pointed out in the podcast we just heard, you get it right. You're likable and lovable, according to you.
That wasn't necessarily confidence so much as comfort. So during those segments, that's like our fight or flight segment where we bring a fight to each other and we're able to just kind of communicate freely. And so I just felt like this is the one time I could probably get this off.
Right.
So let me go ahead. And
he has never said that again.
I've never said it again.
Well, but you just said something interesting, fight or flight. That's again one of those things that people don't know how to handle. You're in that moment. Do you fight to prove your point? Do you run out of the room? How did you, Randie, acquire this? Set aside the podcast. Before you got the podcast, you had to have the marriage, and it had to go from 1 year to 2, 2 to 3, and on. How did you learn to fight and not run away, the flight of it?
We got in a really bad argument, and he called my mom. And he called my mom.
He called for backup. Okay.
So I said somebody else has to deal with this. It wasn't backup. It was like, I'm not doing this today.
Our first year of marriage. And he called her, and I would go to my sister's house and I'd vent, and she was like, you got to stop coming over here. Y'all have to figure it out. And so that's what helped us. That's what helped me to stop fleeing. Like, okay, I can't go anywhere else. No one will take me. So what do I do?
So you're back, because we were just talking in the commercial break about, well, how do you acquire the ability to communicate? A lot of people, you may have grown up in a family where you saw that with your parents. You may have read a lot of books on relationships, but to activate it in your own relationship, that's the tough part, Mikey, to say, we're going to get in this room and we're going to talk about it. It sounds like your back was against the wall and it was going to be a breakup that forced you to talk.
Yeah, so culturally speaking, the way I was brought up, our family is really blunt about things when we want to talk about them. So when we want to talk about them, we bring it up immediately and we handle it right then and there. If we don't want to talk about it, we avoid it until we die. That's just that was my upbringing. That's what I saw.
And that was not mine.
And I didn't want to bring that into my marriage. I did want to I wanted to talk. And if we have something that we should hash out, we should talk about it. Let's do it now. And I learned that that's not really how Randie operates. Sometimes she needs a moment to think. But in that moment, I just kept bombarding her with, hey, this. We need to talk about this now. And she was like, all right, if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. And it blew up into something else. Something else.
And on the podcast, Randie, you say, listen, you're a work in progress. I mean, that's the relatable part of the podcast, and that's why people like it. This is an ongoing thing. It's not you've hit a mark and now voila, it's done.
Yeah, it was really important for us to talk about what's happening in real time with us, because We try not to give advice. We don't have much.
We have no
but
advice.
we knew that if we were going to do this, we had to be authentic, and we couldn't just keep waiting for like the solution or the resolution, because that sometimes it still hasn't come. Like when we miscarried it, it took a few months. Even when we got pregnant again, it was still an ongoing. It was still an ongoing process. So we just
I love it. Well, congratulations on the marriage, moving forward, the podcast. It's such a pleasure to speak with both of you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for having us.
Of course. And by the way, you can catch the Black Millennial Marriage Podcast on Apple Podcasts,